Well, you know, there's something special about diamond digging, and people who dig for diamonds, they're a breed apart.
Well, the diggings as they dug in the old days was one of hardship and one of joys. When a stone was found, you'd find sudden wealth until the money was finished, and then you'd go back to the hard labor again. It's not so much the diamond or the money. It's the thrill of finding something which is out of the ordinary.
And Winterton hasn't changed at all. This is exactly what happened here 50 years ago, when my father had exactly the same sort of operation that Mr. Ickerman is running over there now, with about the same measure of success, which doesn't seem to be very much at all. They are prospecting, hoping to find the big one. He's been in it all his life. My father could never stay away from it for more than a year or two at a time. We kept coming back to the diggings. Digging isn't a profession, you know. It's a disease. And my father had his full measure of it. It was a fever in his blood, and he never got rid of it to the end of his life. One of my father's very best friends was Pete Leverdes.
Oh, his father was a beautiful character. In all the years that I remember, Fossy, as I used to call him, he never had an ounce of fat on his body. He was a vain man with very down-to-earth ideas. He's a man who believed basically in today. Didn't have very much to do with tomorrow. And he lived his life accordingly. If he wanted to do something, he did it. In any sphere of life. He was an old digger, and old diggers, I suppose, learn to live when they've got it and struggle on when they haven't got it. And that was Fossy's whole outlook to life.
I'm today still very scared of gambling of any sort. I don't go to racetracks or casinos. I'm afraid I know I've got that thing in me that once bitten, it will catch me, it will grab hold of me. I'll become a compulsive gambler like my father was. I stay away from places where that sort of temptation arises. Now, Mr. Ickerman tells me that he's going to demolish that house over there. Exactly the same thing happened to my uncle. He's got to demolish that house because the fissure in which the diamonds are runs right through it. And he's not going to let any house stand in his way. I remember my uncle demolished his house piece by piece and room by room until there was nothing left but a 20-foot hole. And they had to go and live in the village. There was nothing left of the house. Poor old De Beers Consolidated Mines. And I think they must be the longest suffering company in the world and the kindest. If they had to put every felon in Kimberley who'd taken things from them in the past, half century, I think half of that city would be in jail by now. This farm is one of their game farms. They allow a large herd of springbuck to run on it. And I'm ashamed to say my father never recognized the De Beers proprietary rights to these springbuck. We used to come out here on the Harley Davidson with a sidecar. I'd sit in the sidecar with a blanket over my lap, hiding the rifle, and we'd poach a couple of springbuck. And I used to drag them through the fence. I was small enough to get through, you see. And then we used to go driving back to Kimberley, and I remember there was a Sergeant Fenter who used to wait for us, quite near the border of the city. He'd come up to my father and he'd say, Paul, what are you down in the sidecar? He'd say, I've got my rifle in the sidecar. He said, what else? My son. What else? A blanket. He said, but what about those horns that are sticking out, Paul? He said, oh, yes, I wanted to tell you about that. I found the springbuck entangled in the De Beers fence. And I was just bringing him in to you to show you how De Beers mishandle and ill-treat their springbuck. Now, you take the springbuck and you must go and show the Oppenheimers about it, huh? And he used to take one springbuck and go off with it, and we'd have the other one under the blanket in the sidecar, and we'd go and eat for 2 weeks. Oh, yes, I'm a complete voluptuary when it comes to eating and drinking. I must say I'm not terribly fond of the usual five-star cuisine. I'm more a sort of a country eater. I like things like stews and bits of mutton. I know, for instance, the Prisca sheep we form a syndicate every year, and when some of them come to the abattoir here, we manage to get hold of a few. It feeds every springtime on a certain kind of bush. Well, that sort of thing. Drinking, wine with the meals, yes. I have a fantastic collection of wines that I've built up over the years. I don't drink very much anymore, I'm afraid. It is a little problem with me, and I try to cut it down as much as possible.
Visitors to our home are often amazed that we have an ordinary sort of life, tables and chairs, and that we like the fact that we like sitting and looking at television instead of sitting on puffs and discussing Kafka and drinking methylated spirits. Although I must say that Gordon likes sitting on the floor, and he hasn't had a cup of tea in many years.
About 2 years ago, I was feeling a bit nasty, and I was in hospital for a few days. And they'd taken my cigarettes away from me, but they gave them back after 2 days and said, you can carry on smoking now. But I thought to myself, I've known all along I have to stop smoking. Suicide, 100, 120 a day of madness. So I thought to myself, well, you've been through the first 2 days, they say those are the worst, so might as well carry on, try for another hour. So I tried another hour, and I've been giving it up hour by hour ever since, and just on an hourly basis. I haven't yet told myself that I have totally stopped smoking. I don't think I could bear the thought, but it's 2 years since I last had a cigarette, so it seems to be working. But one day when the fear of cancer is past, I'll start smoking again. You know, when you get old, when you get towards 70 or 80, and I hope to get there, then who cares about lung cancer? I look forward to smoking again, and I mean, who cares about a bit of damage to the liver when you're 70? I mean, you've made it. It's a welcome Dover stove, and I feel uncomfortable if I don't have one near me. We had a tiny house in Kimberley, and as a youngster I used to sleep in the kitchen during the winters, next to the stove. It was the warmest, most comfortable place in Kimberley. I joined the library. In those days it cost 5 shillings a year for scholars. I joined when I was about 10, and I spent virtually every evening here. As you know, it was during the Depression years, and our home wasn't very attractive. It was poverty-stricken. It was difficult. And this place had beautiful fires going at night, lovely leather chairs, and, of course, all these wonderful books. I think I learned more here than I did in all the schools and universities I went to. Now, this beautifully restored building behind me is the Kimberley City Hall. It used to be the scene of many dances and parties and all the grand occasions of the city. And we also used to hold the Eisteddfod here once a year when I was a schoolboy, and it was here that I first acted on the stage. And when touring companies used to visit Kimberley, from the Hanekoms and Underhugenay, people like that, I used to go along to draw the curtains for these professional companies. And in this way, I developed an interest in theater that's lasted all my life.